are people who fear death so much that they live as if they are hiding from life. They don't dare to love with their whole heart because they fear loss. They don't dare to speak the truth because they fear being wrong. They don't dare to stop because they fear hearing their own inner voice. They think the scariest thing is the day their eyes close. But no, the scariest thing is opening your eyes every morning and not knowing what you are living for. Eating just to get through a meal, working just to get through a day, smiling just to get through a situation. And pain gets buried like burying a corpse. Tonight, I will tell you the story of a man who passed through death and almost let the human part of him die too, only because he lived without awakening. Until a shock forced him to face real pain, and he understood two teachings that seem simple, yet can turn an entire lifetime around. Every pain can be resolved through understanding. Death is not scary. Living without awakening is what's scary. His name was Trần Minh Quân. From the outside, Quân was the kind of man many people wished to be. He had his own construction company, a beautiful house, a good car, a gentle wife, a well-behaved child, friends who respected him, partners who feared him. But at home, Quân was like a clock that ran on time, yet no longer had hands pointing to emotion. He worked from morning until late at night. His constant phrase was, tomorrow. Everything was tomorrow. Dinner with his wife? Tomorrow. Talking with his child? Tomorrow. Visiting his mother? Tomorrow. Because he believed that life is still long. But life is not as long as we think. Every night, Quân stayed awake. Not because he loved pleasure, but because inside him there was a knocking sound. That knocking came from the past, from a death he had never properly buried. Quân had a younger brother named Hai. Hai was the type of person who lived with his heart, hot, real, and often wrong. When they were young, Quân and Hai loved each other, but the older they got, the farther apart they became. Quân hated Hai's impulsiveness. Hai hated Quan's coldness. The night their father died, Hai cried as if his insides were torn apart. Quân stood beside the coffin, face blank, eyes dry. Hai pulled his brother's hand. "Don't you hurt?" Quân spoke, cutting. "What's the point of hurting? Can crying bring Dad back to life?" That sentence was like a knife slash. Hai fell silent, and from then on, Hai no longer told Quân his stories. Then Hai died. A motorbike accident, a rainy night, blood, a collision, and done. People spread rumors. Hai had been drinking. People said dying like that was deserved. Quân heard it all, but he didn't defend him. Not because he hated his brother, but because he couldn't bear admitting he had not understood his own brother. After the funeral, Quân returned to work. No crying, no talking about Hai, no saying his name, as if not mentioning it would make death disappear. But death did not disappear. It only changed places, from outside life into his mind. From then on, Quân began to dream, once a week, then twice, then almost every night. In the dream, Hai stood in the middle of a dark road, his shirt stained with blood, asking only one question. "Brother, do you understand me?" Quân woke up, cold sweat, his heart pounding as if running away. He took sleeping pills. He worked overtime. He forced himself to stay busy. But the busier he became, the deeper the pain turned inward. And inward pain is more frightening than pain that explodes. Quan's wife was named Lan. Lan loved her husband, but Lan lived as if she were beside a man who was always absent. Whenever Lan tried to bring up Hai, Quân only said, "It's over." Lan wanted to ask, "Over for whom?" But she didn't dare, because she feared making Quân angry. Quan's son was named Nam, 16 years old. Nam didn't talk much, he wasn't wild, he wasn't bad, but he didn't smile either. Nam had a sketchbook. It was filled with dark drawings. A person standing in rain, a room without windows, a shadow under a bridge, a car overturned across the road. Lan saw it and asked, "What are you drawing?" Nam answered, "I'm drawing feelings." Lan asked, "What feelings?" Nam stayed silent, and silent children are often children trapped inside their own heads. One evening, Nam said to his father, "Dad, I want to study drawing. I want to apply to fine arts." Quân didn't look at him. His eyes stayed glued to his phone. "Drawing won't feed you." Nam tried to keep his voice steady. "But I like it." Quân put the phone down, his voice hard. "Liking things is for children. A son has to be practical. I'll arrange an economics school." Nam looked at his father for a long time, then nodded. "Yes, but yes doesn't mean agreement. Yes sometimes only means I have no place left to speak." That night, Lan whispered to her husband, Do you see that our child is different? Quan got irritated. Different how? He's well behaved. Lan choked. He's well behaved, but he's sad. Quan replied bluntly. Sadness will pass. Don't make it bigger than it is. Lan turned her face away. Tears flowed. There are tears that don't fall because of poverty. They fall because living with someone who refuses to awaken. That morning it was raining. Quan was on his way to sign a major contract. In the car, he listened to a voice message from a partner, talking about profit, ratios, progress. Quan nodded like a machine. At that moment, a truck surged out from a side road. The screech of brakes, the crash, the sound of shattering glass. The car spun sideways like a toy. In that extremely brief moment, the moment people call between life and death, Quan didn't think about money. He saw Hai. Hai stood in front of the car, looking at him, not blaming, only sad. And in Quan's mind, a sentence rang out clearly. If I die now, have I truly lived? Then darkness. Quan woke up in the hospital. IV lines, the smell of medicine, white lights. The doctor said, "You're lucky. 1 second slower and you'd be gone." Quan stared at the ceiling. His heart pounded. But not because he feared death. It pounded because he suddenly realized he had lived so many years, like a person who was asleep. After the accident, Quan needed rest. Lan took him to a resort near the mountains. One afternoon, Quan went for a walk. He saw a small temple in the forest. No sign that said sacred. No crowd pushing. Only birdsong and the smell of rotting leaves. In the courtyard, an old monk was sweeping leaves. Quan stood for a long time before speaking. "Master, how can I stop hurting?" The monk didn't answer right away. He kept sweeping. Quan grew impatient. "I'm asking you." The monk set the broom down and looked at Quan. "Are you asking to stop hurting? Or are you asking how not to have to look at the pain?" Quan froze. I don't understand." The monk spoke slowly. "People don't hurt because of the wound. People hurt because the wound is abandoned in the dark." Quan gave a faint, bitter smile. "You talk as if you know everything about me." The monk looked straight at him. "I don't know you, but I know the type of person like you." Quan clenched his jaw. "What type?" The monk replied, "The type who lives very right, very successful, but falls asleep in his own life." Quan felt as if he'd been slapped. The monk continued, his voice light as wind. "You've had a pain for a long time. You locked it away. But pain doesn't die. It only turns into anger, into coldness, into fear." Quan swallowed dryly. "I'm not afraid." The monk smiled. "The most afraid are often those who say they are not afraid." Quan fell silent. The monk asked, "Have you lost a loved one?" Quan stayed quiet. The monk continued, "You've never understood your own pain, and without understanding, it cannot be resolved." Then the monk recited slowly, as if reciting a sentence that had been waiting for Quan for a long time. "Every pain can be resolved through understanding." Quan listened, his throat burning. The monk added, "Death is not scary. Living without awakening is what's scary." Quan shivered. He felt that sentence as if it were written straight into his life. That night, Quan didn't sleep. But this time, he didn't hide behind medicine. He sat in the dark, and for the first time, he allowed himself to remember Hai. He remembered Hai as a small boy, running after him, calling Brother Quan. He remembered the time Hai got beaten for fighting, came home crying. And Quan only stood there and said, "Don't be weak." He remembered the funeral, rain falling, Quan standing rigid while inside him was empty. Quan heard again the question from the dream. "Brother, do you understand me?" And this time, Quan answered, even though no one in the room could hear, "I don't understand." I didn't understand. Tears fell, not loudly, but falling like a dam breaking. He cried because his brother died. He cried because he had been cold. He cried because he had lived like someone running away. And strangely, after crying, he felt lighter. Like a room that hadn't opened in a long time, finally had wind. The next morning, Quan returned to the temple. He bowed his head. "Master, what should I do?" The monk asked. "Do you want the pain to end, or do you want to understand the pain?" Quan answered truthfully, "I want to understand." The monk nodded. "Then go home. Talk to your wife. Look into your child's eyes. And if you are still holding a debt to the one who has died, pay it." Quan trembled. "Pay it how?" The monk spoke slowly. "With awakening. Don't keep living like a machine. Don't let your brother's death become a knife cutting your family once again." Quan returned to the city. He tried to change, but change was not easy. Like a person used to running, now forced to learn to walk slowly. One evening, Quan decided to speak to Nam first. "Son, how have you been lately?" Nam looked at his father, surprised as if hearing a stranger ask. "Yes, normal." Kwan swallowed. "Dad, I'm sorry I pressured you." Nam said nothing. Kwan asked again, "Do you still want to study drawing?" Nam looked at his father for a long time. His eyes reddened. "I do, but you probably won't allow it." Kwan was about to say, "I will." But at that moment, the phone rang. A work call. Habit pulled him like a rope. Kwan answered. Nam stood up and went into his room. That night, Nam ran away from home. No message, only the sketchbook left open on its last page. A drawing, a man standing in a house full of things, but not present. Under the drawing was one line, "I'm afraid of living like you." Lan screamed. Kwan stood frozen. He heard the monk's words echo in his mind. Death is not scary. Living without awakening is what's scary. Kwan suddenly understood. Nam didn't leave because he hated the family. Nam left because he was suffocating. And if Kwan didn't awaken right now, he would lose his child the way he lost his brother. Not losing to an accident, but losing to distance. Kwan ran to find Nam. He called Nam's friends, called teachers, searched everywhere. Finally, he got news. Nam was at a friend's art studio, sleeping there. Kwan went there. Nam sat in a corner, drawing. His face tired, his eyes dark. Kwan stood before his son, heart pounding. In the past, he would have shouted, "What kind of stunt are you pulling?" But now he remembered the teaching. Pain must be understood, not pressed down. Kwan spoke softly. "Dad is scared." Nam looked up. "Scared of what?" Kwan swallowed, then said what he had never said in his life. "Dad is afraid. Dad will lose you. And Dad is afraid. Dad doesn't know how to love you the right way." Nam stayed silent. Kwan continued. "Dad once had a younger brother. Dad didn't understand him. When he died, Dad locked the pain away. Dad thought that was strength, but it was sleep." Kwan's tears fell. Nam looked at his father, trembling. "Dad, are you crying?" Kwan nodded. "Yes, because Dad is awake now." Nam burst into tears too. Father and son hugged. There was no lecture, no right and wrong, only one thing, understanding. And understanding is what can resolve the oldest pain. A year later, Kwan returned to the small temple. The old monk was still sweeping leaves. Kwan bowed his head. "Master, I understand now." The monk asked, "Understand what?" Kwan answered, "Understand that death is not scary. What's scary is living without knowing what you are doing to the people you love." The monk smiled. Kwan continued, "I also understand pain is not something to run from. Pain is something to understand. When you understand it, it softens." The monk nodded. "You are awake." Kwan watched the leaves fall and felt his heart calm, not because life had no more upheavals, but because he no longer slept through upheaval. If you listen to this story and feel that inside you there's a knocking sound somewhere, an old pain you still avoid, a person you still haven't understood in time, an apology you still keep for tomorrow, then tonight, try one small thing. Stop for one beat and ask yourself, am I living or am I sleeping? And if you want me to tell another story, also quiet, also painful, also full of drama, based on another teaching of the Buddha, leave the word awake in the comments, so I know you are still listening.